This is Open Door with Vince Robinson. In-depth conversations with people who are making a difference in the lives of others here and around the world. Culture is at the heart of who you are. Know your culture, find yourself on Open Door with Vince Robinson.
Grand dawning, Cleveland, Ohio. Welcome to Open Door with Vince Robinson. I have a very special guest. All my guests are special, but I have a really special guest this morning. Her name is Judith Mansour. She is the author of a brand new book of poetry. It's a memoir in poetry and prose. It's called Kan Zaman. I'm pleased to have her on Open Door. Welcome to Open Door, Judy.
Thanks, Vince. I'm happy to be here.
Happy to have you. And, I usually start off my shows just talking about how I know folks. I try to be as transparent as possible. And I know that you have a history with respect to Lit CLE, which at some point was the Lit and some other incarnations of the, I think it was a Poets and Writers League of Greater Cleveland or something like that. So it's been.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, I mean, the Poets and Writers League and the Lit Cleveland's Literary Center were one organization. And sadly, we closed in 2011 after the housing crisis and the terrible recession. And then Literary Cleveland popped up on the scene some years later as a totally different organization. But I'm glad they're here, and I'm glad literary arts are alive and well.
Yes. Well, they definitely took the baton and they're running with it. And kudos to Matt for all that he's doing there. We had an event. I'll say we loosely because it was your event, but I was really honored to be a part of that. And one of the things that really impressed me about that occasion, Judy, was just the diversity in the room. It was just such a great thing to look out and see folks from all different walks of life. And what brought them all together was you. So let's talk about your history first. Obviously, you're a writer and you have a history with helping others who are into writing. When did your journey as a writer begin?
Oh, boy. So when I was in the first grade, I grew up in Youngstown, Ohio, and we had this thing in the Vindicator, Youngstown Vindicator, which was a newspaper called the Mini Page. And it was a little paper for kids. And a guy that I went to grade school and then high school with, he was a few years older than me, and he was on student council. And I think I was in maybe first or second grade. I can't remember which, but we learned about haiku. And I wrote a haiku, and his name was George Nakeley. He was a great guy, great arts patron. And he ran our school newspaper. And he submitted my haiku to the Mini Page, and it got published. And I mean, that was the beginning of my journey. And, I always loved words. Words to me were like ingredients in my mom's kitchen. So. Okay.
So you grew up in Youngstown then?
I did.
Okay.
Proud Youngstowner.
Okay. And you revealed in the event that you had about your Lebanese background. Can you talk about your relationship to Lebanon and what that means to you?
Oh, sure. So I traveled to Lebanon for the first time this past summer. And as much as, it wasn't, I wanted to go sooner, but circumstances just weren't right for it to happen, I guess. My grandparents came on both sides. My mom's dad came in the late 1800s. My dad's family came in the, early 1900s. And, my mom's family, both of her parents became very westernized. This is America. Let's, enjoy the fruits of Western society, and became very, very, very westernized. Daddy's family, his mom, my grandmother, Victoria, she became very, modern and loved America. But my grandfather, my Jid, my dad's dad, he pined for the old country. He missed the old ways. And so although the culture was really very much held up on both sides of the family, only my grandfather on my Mansour side ever really traveled back and forth to Lebanon. And the last time he went was in the 1970s, just at like the beginning of the Civil War, when things were so awful. And when he came back, my dad and my uncle and my aunt went to pick him up in New York. And when he got off the boat, he knelt down and kissed the ground in the U.S. Now, that was something for him because he pined for his country. And he said, my country is ruined. I'll never go back. And so, from that point on, there was a lot of unrest there, and we never felt that it was safe to go. My dad wanted to go. We all wanted to go, but we were all kind of afraid. And in more recent years, we wanted to make the trip. We had plans to make the trip. COVID happened. Then my dad passed away. And this summer, I finally went. And Vince, it was an awakening unlike anything I've ever experienced.
Yeah, I can imagine. I mean, I've been to that part of the world. I visited Northeast Africa actually for the first time in 1981. Mm-hmm. And then I went back in 1984. And I went back in 1992. In 92, I was in Israel and Egypt, and I traveled through parts of the northern part of Israel, and it was like bordering Lebanon. So I was in the proximity, and I have a taste for what that was like. Yeah. I was reading in your book, and I was reading the story of how two people came to America. And they were actually husband and wife, or to be husband and wife, and but they came as brother and sister. Yeah. And you tell the story in your book about somebody looking in someone's eyes and getting pushed down and getting their ribs cracked. Could you tell us that story? Because it was profound to me, and I might have a question for you after you explain.
Sure. So that's the story of my grandparents. My grandparents had an arranged marriage. And my grandmother really never had the desire to be married. She had the desire to become a nun. But, her family wanted her to have this marriage. And so as a dutiful daughter, that's what she did. And she went into it with a sincere, open heart. And, she was dressed up. She looked very, very pretty. And as she and her betrothed, my grandpa, were on their walk, he noticed other men looking at her. And she looked up at him and smiled as if to say, I'm trying really hard to be pretty for you. I'm going to try to be a good wife, even though this isn't, really what I want. All unspoken, of course. And he pushed her down into a ditch. And, that kind of set the stage. And it's a terrible story that makes me really, really sad for both of them. I know that my grandfather was raised by the quintessential evil stepmother who beat him and starved him and was not kind to him. And when he was 12 years old, he literally threw her out of the house so that he and his sisters could live safely finally. I'm guessing his father was deceased. I really don't know. My dad told us that story, and my grandmother told us that story as well. My Jid never really talked about it very much. But I know that he had a rough upbringing. And I also feel, too, like what he did, of course, was very wrong. He could be a very, very violent man. I don't want to say violent. That's whatever. But, he was a troubled guy. But I don't think he ever knew what it was to be loved or to let himself be loved.
Okay. Because the
hurt
people.
Yeah,
the question that I still struggle to understand is why he did that.
I think it was a message of don't think you're something.
Okay. All right. So I think it really was something that impacted her for the rest of her life. As I read that narrative,
Yes.
they talked about, when she left and why and so forth and so on. But that was just a fascinating story, and when I think about that, I think about the changes that have happened with our generations.
Yes.
In relation to the way we relate to each other,
Yes.
and what comes to mind is the movie Fences. I don't know if you ever saw Fences or the play Fences that was written by August Wilson.
Yes.
Denzel Washington directed and acted in that film a few years ago.
Yeah.
And what really struck me about that was the way his character was holding on to the way his father raised him.
Yes.
And trying to implement those types of ideas in raising his own son when times have changed, and parenting has changed. There was a time when, you didn't think anything about grabbing a belt and whipping a child,
Oh, yeah.
You don't do those kinds of things today for a number of reasons, one of which is it's probably not a good idea right now.
Right.
It's traumatic for a child. And the things that happen to us in our childhood affect us for the rest of our lives. I mean, those 5, 7, 5 syllables that you wrote launched your career as a writer.
Mm-hmm.
So you can look at that event or that occurrence as something that has a positive impact on who you are today. But conversely, those negative things that happen to us cause us to walk around with trauma and pain. And many times we don't address that, and then we're walking wounded.
Yes.
Yeah. So and that just brings me to the idea of the why that you write, because it's not solely because you wrote that haiku. There was a benefit that has come to you for writing over the years, and your book. And is this your first book?
Yes.
Okay, so in that, there's probably a catharsis that happened as a result of that. I mean, memoirs, and you're reflecting on their lives, and you're reflecting on your brother's life, as we discovered, and other things. So I kind of want to get to the why you write, the why you continue to write, and the future of writing. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a quick break, and then we're going to come back, and we're going to immerse ourselves in the writing mind of Judith Mansour. She is the author of Kan Zaman, a memoir of poetry and prose. We'll be right back with more of Open Door with Vince Robinson right here on 95.9 FM WOVU, Burton Belcar Community Radio. Back in a minute.
We here at WOVU 95.9 FM would like to extend a special thank you to our community partners for your support. Thank you to the United Way of Greater Cleveland, the NAACP Cleveland Branch, the City Club of Cleveland, and University Circle Incorporated. Your partnership helps WOVU sustain our mission of helping uplift and engage the community. From all of us here at WOVU, we thank you.
Hi, I'm Sophie Absolutely.
And I'm Love Lachey XO.
Hey guys, it's Chef Vic with Sauce the City.
Yo, what it do with your girl DJ Coco Z?
This your boy Lee Tron Twitty with My Smart Home Ohio.
What's good, y'all? This is Affinity with Spellbound Sounds.
Hey everyone, this is Purpose, CEO and founder of Stiletto Boss Women's Group. I love listening to WOVU 95.9 FM.
Welcome back to Open Door with Vince Robinson. My guest is Judith Mansour. She's the author of Kan Zaman. Am I saying that right, Judy?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Because we have a habit sometimes of anglicizing sometimes. Mm-hmm. So if somebody's uninformed, they would say Kan Zaman.
Well, the truth of the matter is it's all dialect, and pronunciation is informed by dialect. So somebody from one region of Lebanon might say Kan Zaman, and somebody from another region might say Kan Zaman. So it just depends. So right here, there's no real way to say it. And the word maza, which means like appetizers and things. My dad always said meza. My mom said maza, tomato. It depends on where you're from, and they were both born here, but their parents were from different regions.
Yeah. Well, the most important thing is that what you say is understood, whether it's tomato or tomato. We know what the fruit is.
That's right.
Yeah. So talk to us about the meaning of the title.
Talk to you about the title. So Kan Zaman means a couple of different things. Words have their real meaning and then they have their connotation, right? And so Kan Zaman means a long time ago, but it can also mean once upon a time, like in a fairy tale, or it can be used sarcastically, like, oh, and that's just how it was. And it can also mean like way, way back. Once, again, with that once upon a time, but also in a storytelling kind of way. And I really, really struggled with a title for this book. And the man who did the cover art, Joe Giha, who is a celebrated Arab American writer, I loved his work, his written work. I was introduced to him by a former professor of mine from undergraduate school who grew up in Toledo, as did Joe. And he began painting, and I fell in love with his work. And so much of it harkened back to the past and what we called the old country. And all I could think about was, oh God, way back then. And after I went to Lebanon and finally, I always felt this otherness. And then when I went there, I finally felt like I was at home. And I had this, this memory of something like an old familiarity, a memory from a long, long time ago. And so that felt authentic. But then I also was thinking too, my memories aren't all going to be accurate. Memory is faulty. And so, you kind of have to fill in the blanks here and there, and somebody will remember it one way, another person will remember it another way. And, that can get a little tricky sometimes. And so that's where and that's how it was comes in, that's how I remember it.
Yeah.
So it just felt to me like the natural title.
Right. And so when you returned, you had a physical response to being there. And I just think about the idea of epigenetic memory. When we talk about memory, we always think of it in terms of something that happens in our mind. And we don't consider the fact that our mind is in every cell in our body.
Right.
So when your feet touch that soil, there's a reaction to it just because of your physical connection to it. I relate to that in that the first time that I visited Egypt.
Yes.
And I was riding down the street, one desert highway, and I looked up and I saw the Great Pyramid, Khufu, on the Giza Plateau.
Yes.
And I actually had a rush go through my body. And perhaps as you, I was remembering physically being there for the first time. Perhaps that's what you experienced in that moment.
It was as if I had always belonged there, been there. It felt so natural to be there, even though I had never been there. It was more beautiful than I could have ever imagined. And it was more familiar than I could have ever imagined. It just, like I said, it just felt like what you said, it just felt like that there was genetic coding for that memory.
Mm-hmm.
And go ahead.
No, go ahead and I'll finish.
I just felt like I felt the presence of everybody who came before me. You know, I felt my grandparents from, you know, my mom's side, my dad's side. I felt the presence of these older relatives that I knew when I was a little girl, you know, my Uncle Kaiser and Aunt Omaza, and, you know, all these other people that used to hang around with my grandparents, you know, and I could just feel them. I could see them, and I could place them in these villages, you know, and it's not that they're not modern in any way. They are, but their way of life, they brought that here with them, and they kept it, and they gave it to me and my brothers and, you know, all of us kids. Mm-hmm. And I just think it's so important to keep giving it, even if it's not to family. I mean, you heard me Saturday night. Once I meet you, you're my family. So I'm just going to keep giving that to people that I meet because it's important.
Yeah. And again, to relate to what you're saying, I recall being in Ghana because I've been there a few times. And the last time I was there, we walked a path to a river. And this river was a place where they would hang the enslaved from these trees over the river, and they would scrub them with bamboo.
Oh.
And this was the last place. They called it literally the last bath. This was the last place that you would be before they put you on a ship to take you somewhere. And as I was walking the path to that river, and they told us to take our shoes off, as I walked that path to the river and my feet connected with that ground, tears started flowing down my cheeks.
Yeah.
It was the same thing when I was standing in the slave dungeons, Cape Coast, same thing, you know, being there and having a conversation with my ancestors at that time. Mm-hmm. And it brought me to tears. So I totally and fully appreciate what you're saying. Your book was actually birthed by that experience, was it not?
Yes and no. Mm-hmm. I would say that my book was birthed. I started writing the memoir pieces a long, long time ago, the essays, but my book was birthed after losing 3 family members in 2021. And I couldn't for the life of me process that much loss all in one time. And poetry was never really my forte, but the short phrases were what I could manage. And giving it rhythm felt reassuring to me somehow. And my brother, Albert, was rhythm itself. And so that helped me to make order and sense of something to me that just felt, you know, meaningless. You know, my niece, Sarah, who's the oldest niece, her younger sister was the one who died, and she was the first one we lost last year. And she said to me, you know, when Grandma died, it was like all the lights went out in the house. And when Grandpa died, it was like the foundation got shaken and cracked. But when Uncle Albert died, it was like the roof got blown off the house and there was nothing to protect us. That's what started me writing about it.
Yes. So I posed the question about the why, and I think you really just answered that question. And I really think that it's important for people to understand how powerful writing can be as a means of deep grief. Because I'd have to imagine that it was a cathartic experience for you. And the reason that I said that your trip to Lebanon was the impetus is because that's part of what pushed you to say, let me get this done.
It's what pushed me to say, these big extended families that grew up together as one unit. That doesn't exist anymore in this country. And it's important that people know the value of it and how much love there was. I mean, from, neither of my grandparents' marriages were happy marriages. They were both arranged marriages. I think that my mom's parents' marriage could have been a happier marriage. I think it started out happier, but there was this crash of the stock market and things didn't go well after that, But I think that, out of dire circumstances can come really, really strong people, and you hold together, you protect each other. And, it's like the one poem that I wrote about, the broken glass, I think it was. And it's like, you have this platinum fencing, platinum barbed wire. Platinum is so valuable, but barbed wire it hurts you, but it holds you all together, Yeah. And that's kind of how I thought of my grandpa, platinum barbed wire.
It's on page 21. Would you mind reading it for us?
Sure. Oh, boy. Broken glass. From broken glass, he built a mosaic, opulent shards carefully placed. A sun, the diamond crest that shimmered and glinted in early morning before he awoke. By noon he was cold from scoldings and don'ts. Then a daughter, an emerald, a most precious jewel, pearled high in the air, placed oh so soft in just the right square. Hard to contain, bled outside the lines till nothing was left. Then a few more, wrapped in their blankets of lapis and gold, pieces of pieces that shone with hope, all contained in platinum barbed wire, grouted together, bonded by fear, a stained glass window, a rose-colored family.
Powerful words, Judy. As I was saying before we started this conversation, it was just so inspirational to read your words. I think about what you read. I also think about the three folks that you had with you, Charlotte Morgan and Jillian Johns and William Breeze, and what they presented. And even though it wasn't poetry, and even though it didn't have the musical accompaniment, it was so powerful. It was like folks were just wrapped into it, and there were so many poignant moments that evening. I also want to underscore the importance of writing something like this as a tool of preserving your history.
Yeah.
We're living in an age where they want to exclude certain things from history, but there's nothing more important to a family than the narrative of who they are.
Yeah.
So when you write things like this, you create a historical document, not just a book. Yeah. So I just want to talk for a few moments about the importance of history. And as you acknowledged, also remembering our ancestors.
Yes.
Because if we continue to speak their names, they continue to exist. But when we stop speaking their names, then they fade off into oblivion.
Right. I don't want those people to be forgotten. I don't want their imperfections to be forgotten. I don't want their beauty to be forgotten. That if it happened and it's true, it needs to be remembered, good, bad, or otherwise.
Yes. Yeah. And it's a real struggle for some folks to remember the bad because they don't want it to be known, but it doesn't erase the fact that those things happened. I just think it's important to remember. And so we'll continue to do that. There's another ingredient, I will say, Talk about Judith Mansour, and I'm testifying because I know that we interact on Facebook sometimes, and a lot of it has to do with food. And when people were talking about Judith Mansour the other night, they were talking about her relationship with food, and I know that it must be good. Folks will be lined up at your door, waiting for a plate, a fork, and a knife, and a spoon. So we're going to talk about food when we come back, and then we'll talk about the future for the writer, Judith Mansour, in that, this is your first book. It took you so long to get there, but after you do it once, I would have to imagine that you probably want to do some more books. So we'll dive a little bit more into that when we return. You're listening to Open Door with Vince Robinson on 95.9 FM, WOVU, Burton Belcar Community Radio. Our guest is Judith Mansour. She is the author of Kan Zaman, or Kan Zaman, depending on your perspective. But as we said, we'll know what it means when we get to it. We'll be right back with more Open Door after this.
No offense, but what were we just listening to?
Oh, just something my previous writer wanted to hear. Want something else?
Yeah, actually, for sure. Can you switch that station to 95.9 FM, please?
Yeah, for sure. What kind of station is this?
What? You're not hip to 95.9 FM, BBC Community Radio? They have so many good shows. Whether it's a talk show, music show, it's so much good information on this station.
Yeah, I'll have to keep the dial right here then, since I drive so many different walks of life every day.
I literally listen every day and find out something new. Whether it's something for myself, my community, or just something special that's going on in the city.
Yeah, thanks. I'll keep it locked right here on WOVU 95.9 FM.
Good, because I'm sure you and all your other writers would love this station just as much as I do.
WOVU 95.9 FM LP is a community radio station that is an enterprise of Burton Belcar Development Incorporated, BBC, the nonprofit community development corporation serving the greater Cleveland community through the terrestrial frequency of 95.9 FM. WOVU provides a vehicle to connect people to valuable information and resources through on-air broadcasting and associated social media platforms. WOVU addresses the concerns of the urban community with solutions-driven information that allows us to showcase Northeast Ohio talent and positive urban music not typically found on mainstream radio. We operate with the motto that people support what they help create. And WOVU, our voices united, provides exciting and creative ways to engage, involve, and uplift the community.
Welcome back to Open Door with Vince Robinson. My guest is Judith Mansour. She is the author of a beautiful book of poetry and prose. I know that you can probably go to Max Backs and find this book. If you're like other authors, it might be on Amazon, maybe not. It might be on your own personal website, maybe not. But I know that if you want to do Susan DeGaetano a favor, go over on Coventry with Max Backs and purchase this book, and I guarantee you will enjoy reading it. I enjoyed the rhyme. I enjoyed the meter. I really enjoyed the juxtaposition of your words against music. You told me about your brother and his relationship to music, and I was reading the piece that you wrote dedicated to him, and I just heard William Devon in my head. Just be thankful for what you got, You brought out the term player, So I'm thinking, what's his name? Ron O'Neal. And that, and then you wrote about the Monte Carlo with the land dog top. And I'm like, wow, Dad had a 73 Monte Carlo. It was Night Blue. It had that half Landau vinyl top that was supposed to be like leather, and it had the swivel bucket seats that would turn out towards the door. You know, so you really took me back with that. So,
oh my God, he had it was a black T-top Grand Prix. And I mean, that thing glimmered. So Albert had a little side business. He had a job in downtown Youngstown at this little wine shop that our kind of a distant cousin owned. Long time, Ohio Wines, you know, and they ran numbers out of the back. I mean, this is Youngstown. Of course they ran numbers out of the back. But anyway, Albert used to wash and wax cars for all of Youngstown's elite. You know, he'd be pulling up in our driveway. And this is before anybody had imported cars. You know, he had the guy that had the first Mercedes-Benz in Youngstown pulled up in our driveway in that Mercedes-Benz, and it was olive green. And we were like, what is that? You know, and, you know, it wasn't, you know, it was dirty and whatever. And he pulled out and it was glimmering. But I will never forget, he was washing and waxing that car. It was before he could afford or had his own car. And he was playing, I mean, the music, Bootsy, Average White Band, Queen of My Soul, Average White Band, you know, and he'd be out there washing and waxing, moving along with the music and everything like that. And, to this day, whenever I go to get my car washed, in my head, I'm hearing work to do, you know, Average Way. I've got work to do. So, you know, Albert was a huge influence on my musical tastes, you know.
Yeah. Well, when you bring up Work to Do, I remember the original version, and I remember the version that Vanessa Williams did.
Yes.
And I love that song. It was like I would just play it over and over and over again because
yes,
dope.
I know. I'm taking care of business. Woman can't just. I love that song.
Yeah. So yeah. I would like folks to hear that poem that you dedicated to Albert, and I think if I can, I might work some music behind it.
Sure.
But can you read that poem for us?
Sure, I'd be delighted to. So this is for Albert. It's called Slick. Playa, the word girls now say. His rooftop was T-topped. Chrome mag wheels and a hood that shone. Self-installed stereo for the beat to blare and bounce off the seat. Smooth as skin, unseen by sun. A set stage, Monte Carlo coupe, black and gray, come what may. Girlfriend, lady friend, just need a ride. Front seat fine, bucket seat leaned, just enough for that kiss to hold. But whose hand it was, we never did know. The limelighter called, ambrosia on stage. The theatrical, sly, smoky, and jazzed. Then there was Beachcomber, not his scene. No funk, no blues, no rhythm in sight. Bell-bottom bozos and shirts too tight. Top 40 bitters who thought they could groove. We knew the name, but not the scene. Orange Room's back room, another place to hide. Gabe's was a hole with watery booze. Girls not his style, all silk and flash. Names left outside when he rolled in at dawn to crash on the couch. He was clean, smelled like spice, so said Cardin, designer du jour. His shoes, his jeans, his cologne Porham, a scotch on the rocks, Teddy Pendergrass blues. When somebody knocked, and they always knocked, wanting to see who was inside. We met one or two that we'd spy if we hid. Not dates, he'd snarl. Even when asked, he wouldn't say. Got taken, got took, so now he was slick. Like the guy in the band, average white variety. He learned his lesson, just like the song. It is, after all, nothing more than a schoolboy crush.
All right. I'm giving you hand taps and finger snaps for that. Where do you think his affinity to funk and R&B came from?
Well, growing up, we lived in a very, very ethnically diverse mixed neighborhood. And the grade school that my oldest siblings, Albert, Gina, and John, went to, St. Columba, closed. The number of students there, there weren't enough students to maintain the school. But, it was very racially mixed. And it was the same for the one that I went to also, Immaculate Conception. So, we had a lot of friends that the taste in music. And not only that, I think that was primarily what was on the radio then, wasn't it? I mean, Sly and the Family Stone. I think that was more top 40 than anything else back then, wasn't it? I mean, I don't know. I was really very little.
Yeah, some of it was popular music. Some of it you had to go after. So it really had to be something that you were into, just reflecting on my childhood. Mm-hmm. I spent some time on the island of Okinawa back in the 70s.
Okay.
So where I was, we had Armed Forces radio.
Mm-hmm.
So they played some of that, but it wasn't exclusively that. But I was exposed to it and I gravitated towards it. So I bought Sly and the Family Stone albums, mm-hmm. and I bought the Jackson 5 and those kinds of things. But I was also a student at Massillon Washington High School.
Mm-hmm.
And I was kind of into music and the communication because I was a DJ back then. And so I just remember playing everyone. We played Grand Funk Railroad and the Doobie Brothers. But we played the Ohio Players, and we played Earth, Wind, and Fire and all of that. So, and Massillon Washington High School was a predominantly white school.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so was Wilson. Right.
Yeah, but everybody got exposure to the music. So the white kids liked the Ohio Players as much as they liked the Doobie Brothers.
Exactly. And I mean, I felt like that's how it was too. And I think too, our next door neighbors, the Elams, were a Black family, and the Elams were our best friends. So I think probably Karen and Bubba's taste in music and Gina and Albert's taste in music probably coincided for sure. Because I mean, they all hung out together, and whoever got the first, the new release of whoever's album was out, we were at each other's house to listen to it, or they were. And I can't say we because I was, a baby, but that was just kind of how it was.
Yeah. So, those were the days, Judy. I mean, you had a party, you pull out the albums, you put the needle on the record, and boys and girls would dance with each other. Things have changed so much.
Yes. We had this one neighbor, Marvin Switka, I can't remember his last name, but Marvin always had the best albums. And he'd come, Marvin worked at this gas station, and, he always had the newest release albums. And I don't know if he had a record player or not, but as soon as he got an album, he'd come over to our house, and then everybody would come over to our house and they'd be dancing in our living room, And, I have really happy memories of that. I don't know if it happened all that frequently, but in my mind it did. I remember the kids just and I don't know whether my parents must have been out or whatever. I don't know, but I just have that memory. And Marvin and my cousin Gary teaching all of the kids how to do the funky chicken. I remember that. So.
Oh, yes. Rufus Thomas would have been proud, wouldn't he?
Yes.
Okay, so I want to shift gears and I want to get to your relationship with food, because food, like music, is something that brings folks together. Yeah. Your culinary acumen, I'll just put it that way. Acumen, where did that come from?
Well, food is the great equalizer. And I think, my love of food and my love to share food came from my mom and dad, and it came, I know, from their parents. And what they've said to me was, we were poor. We didn't have anything to share, but we always had enough food. And so, in order to be hospitable when anybody visited, you put out food. And, so that's that's just what I learned. And, I think that everybody now talks about a love language. And I know for sure that was my Sithi's love language, and it was my mother's too. You love somebody, you cook them some food. And, I remember this one time, my dad brought Danny Thomas to town for a St. Jude radiothon or telethon, and he grew up Lebanese. He's Lebanese or was Lebanese and grew up in a big family just like ours. And so my mom made this Arabic stuffed chicken and some kibbe, the baked kibbe that, she thought he would like. And my dad took it up to his hotel room, and my cousin Patrick and I went with my dad for whatever reason. We were both little. I mean, maybe 10 years old. I don't know. And I remember Danny like picking up the pine nuts and the crumbs with his fingers and like being in tears and saying, "Oh my God, this tastes just like my mother's. It tastes just like my mother's," and literally crying. And that really affected me. How food took him back. He was older by then. He was, not a young man. And so I just remembered that. And, to this day, I've had those experiences. Just a few years ago, my husband and I were in Mexico City. And, no matter where I am, if I see a good Lebanese restaurant, I have to go eat there. And I ordered the kibbe nayi, which is, it's the Lebanese version of steak tartare, so it's raw, and I ordered it, which I'm always very scared and hesitant to do, but this was a really great restaurant, and I'm eating it, and I'm like, I teared up, and Tom says, "What's the matter?" I said, "This tastes just like my mom's." And nobody's kibbe ever tastes. Everybody raved about my mother's kibbe. And the chef came out to talk to us because he rarely ran into other Lebanese people in Mexico City. And he was from the same village as my mom's mother. And it was just a beautiful thing. And so, when I cook and when I, entertain and share food with people, that's just, that's how I show you that I love you, And I think, you said that it was such a great, diverse crowd the other night. Well, everybody has to eat, and food is a great equalizer. So if you can bring people together through food, that's a great thing. And one of my great inspirations, poet Naomi Shihab Nye, has this beautiful poem called Red Brocade. And it's about when you have a traveler, a stranger who knocks on your door, before you ask him any questions, invite him into your home, give him the red brocade pillow, give his horse water, and feed him for 3 days before you ask him any questions. By then, you'll be such good friends, you won't care what his story is. You'll want to just continue to snip mint into his tea. Yeah. And I love that poem, and I had the blessing of having Naomi write it out for me in calligraphy, and it hangs above my door, or it used to. We moved into a new house, and the door's too high, but that's how I feel.
Okay, we're gonna say a little bit more about food because I got something I gotta ask you about, and I think everyone will relate to it. So I'm gonna drop that bomb on you when we get back.
Okay.
The Open Door with Vince Robinson. My guest is Judith Mansour. She's the author of Kan Zaman, and it is a memoir of poetry and prose. We'll be right back right here on 95.9 FM WOVU, Burt Belcar Community Radio.
WOVU 95.9 FM and the Buckeye Christian Collaborative want you to know about the Nehemiah Project. The Nehemiah Project is a campaign for a clean Buckeye neighborhood. We're asking everyone who lives, works, rides, drives, and resides in the Buckeye area to take charge and help build a clean, healthy, and prosperous Buckeye. Giving a helping hand is easy. If you see trash, pick it up, throw it away. Remember, don't litter, and residents and homeowners can easily help out by keeping your yard mowed and litter free. You can organize a cleanup for your streets or neighborhood. The Nehemiah Project will help. Call 216-721-7300 at extension 13. That's 216-721-7300, extension 13. Or you can send an email to nehemiahproject22@gmail.com. That's nehemiahproject22@gmail.com. The Nehemiah Project for a Clean Buckeye is supported by the Western Reserve Conservancy, Greater Cleveland Habitat for Humanity, 4th District Neighborhood Police, Ohio Environmental Protection Agency, H&R Block, St. Luke's Foundation, Burton Bell Car Development, Buckeye Christian Collaborative, and WOVU 95.9 FM. Our voices unite. Burton Bell Car Community Radio.
Hi, this is Ken Hawkins.
Hi, this is Pinky.
This is T.C. Lewis.
This is Shantae Chappers.
This is Reggie Hayman.
This is Bill Silverby Richards. If you're not listening to WOVU 95.9 FM, you're not in the mix. I'm Silverby. Crank it up.
24 hours of golden.
Welcome back to Open Door. I'm speaking with Judith Mansour. She's written a great book. It's called Kan Zaman, and we've been talking about food. Now, I was reading that book, and I got to a passage where you described a particular dish that smells terrible when it's being prepared, but somehow, miraculously, when you dip your spoon or your fork into it, it tastes great. Tell us the name of that dish, and I'm going to tell you what the African-American equivalent is.
It's called umhi. It's wheat pearls that it's stewed on lamb and chicken bones, but primarily lamb bones. And it smells like death itself.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, the stewing of the bones does, but you have to do it to make the delicious stew.
Okay. Well, round about Thanksgiving and Christmas, for some reason, folks in my community and others prepare something called chitterlings.
Oh, yeah.
But we call them chitlins.
Yeah.
And I'm going to have to tell you, I vividly recall one Christmas that we went to my cousin's house in Springfield, and they had a pot of chitlins on the stove. Now, this is when I had just become a vegetarian.
Mm-hmm.
So the smell was just overpowering. I probably tasted chitlins in my life once or twice. And yeah, you know, they didn't taste the way they smelled, but I just had no interest in ever having. I was traumatized by that one time. I think that's probably one of the things that just pushed me completely away from meat. But those who enjoy it, you know, I say, hey, whatever works for you, enjoy it. Just not my choice. But, you know, when I read that piece of the book, the first thing that came to my mind was chitlins. Your palate is probably something that crosses ethnic lines. Are there certain things that you are more attracted to others, or what's your go-to in terms of food?
Well, so Daddy was one of 9 kids, and 4 of the 9 kids married into Italian families, Youngstown, big Italian population. So we had Italian as much as we had Lebanese, because we had all these wonderful, like I said, once you were married in, we were all family. And so, you know, Big Graham, it was my Uncle George's mother-in-law, my Aunt Connie's mom, and they lived across the street. Big Graham, you know, she was an amazing cook. She was Sicilian. My Aunt Clara Cervone, you know, her mother-in-law was Italian. There were all these wonderful Italian cooks in the family. So I absolutely love Italian food. I can no longer eat wheat, but, you know, I'm figuring out ways around that. But sauce, you know, sauce is the most important part of Italian food. So, you know, Italian and Lebanese are probably my 2 go-tos, but I love to experiment with cooking, and I'll blend about, you know, I try to do some fusion things. Like one of my more creative dishes is I'll take pasta and I will make a cream sauce with all of the traditional Arabic flavors. So I'll use a cream sauce that has tomato paste, cinnamon, allspice, just barely a hint of cumin because it'll overpower. And then I'll do a homemade lamb sausage in it. And I do that over top of the pasta. And, it's garnished with, a chiffonade of mint or something like that. So I like to try to, blend cultures when I cook too. So I'm making stuff up as I go along, If I think it'll taste good, I try. If it doesn't taste good, well, it doesn't.
It sounds like to me that the next book should be a cookbook.
Well, my cousin Stan is writing a cookbook, and he is half Polish. And his mom, my Aunt Sarah, was, oh my God. And I mean, I came from a long line of outrageous cooks. And so he's doing a cookbook called Dinner at Stash's. And I'm going to leave that to him. I want Stash's book, I'm going to leave it to him because you know what? He's the chef. I mean, he's the true chef talent in the family. I'll call him up and be like, so what are you up to? He's like, oh, well, we're going to saute this or that in a courvoisier and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, I have pretty hair. I just can't compare to all that. But what I do love to do, and it's something that I'm doing with a novel in progress. Food is always symbolic in my stories. And so rather than write a cookbook, I would rather use the food to conjure the mood about something. Like that dish that smells awful but tastes delicious. That is the food of mourning. That's something that when you are sad, that is a blanket of comfort. It's not for everybody, and I could make a vegetarian version that would be absolutely delicious. But that's, I've heard from friends who are Italian that that's what pastine is to them.
Okay. I would be remiss if I didn't give you an opportunity to talk about how this book was able to happen. And I know that John Burroughs was an integral part of that. So could you talk about how the publishing came about?
Sure. I was having, Tom and I had a good friend of ours, Rob Jackson, to dinner one night. And I had been compiling all these poems and so on and so forth. And Rob had been on my board at the Lit, and, he was part of Red Giant Books and some other, he's a total literary devotee and great writer, great musician. And I said, I know that I know all these publishers, all these agents, but I don't know. I'm just not ready to do that. I don't know where to put my work. I don't know what to do with it. And he was like, why don't you call John Burroughs? And I'm like, I haven't talked to John Burroughs since the Lit closed. I don't want to be like, hey, I haven't talked to you in a million years, but do you want to publish my book? And he was like, well, let me make that introduction for you. And, if I didn't think your work was good enough, I wouldn't put you in touch with them. I said, oh, okay. So, I chewed my fingernails for a couple of nights. And then John Burroughs wrote me, and I was thrilled. And then I sent him some stuff and chewed my fingernails some more. And he wrote me back and said that he would love to publish my work. And so then I got serious and started really trying to reshape and edit the work. And, it's never done. It's merely abandoned. So I got it to a place where I felt like, okay, I can put this out in the world and not feel, like it's unfinished.
Yes. Well, I have to commend you. It's a beautiful work, and what you said about food is woven into the fabric of your words, and I appreciate that as well. So congratulations on the book. I heard you say that you're working on a novel, so we'll look forward to that. So when you get it done, just let me know and we'll do this again. But I want to thank you so much for being my guest, and I look forward to sharing the gospel of Judith Mansour around the world via YouTube and via 95.9 FM. Thanks for joining me. And thank you to all of those of you who are listening to the program right now. As always, know yourself, love yourself, be yourself, and make today your absolute best day. Peace.
Peace.